There are several rules that should be followed when going to war. 1. Germany should never fight wars against the entire world. 2. Don't invade Russia in the winter. And 3. Never fight a land war in Asia. There's also one other rule that should be added to that list. Don't count on Switzerland as an ally. For over 2 centuries, Switzerland has remained staunchly neutral, even when wars were being fought just over its borders. Learn more about Swiss neutrality and what that means on this episode of Everything Everywhere Daily. This episode is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Did you know that internet service providers, including mobile network providers, know every single website you visit? And in the United States, ISPs are legally allowed to sell that information to advertisers. And that is just one of many reasons why you need to use a virtual private network or VPN. ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers, so your ISP can't see your browsing history. Moreover, unlike other VPN companies you might have heard about, ExpressVPN uses what they call trusted server architecture. Their server runs entirely in RAM with no hard drives, meaning that after a reboot, nothing persists and there are no logs. ExpressVPN's apps are available on phones, laptops, tablets, and smart TVs. ExpressVPN now has a permanent home on my desktop and my Apple TV to allow me better and more secure access to more content. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/EED. That's expressvpn.com/EED to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months. expressvpn.com/EED. This episode is sponsored by Mint Mobile. The reality is that smartphones and their associated mobile plans have become an indispensable part of the modern world. You almost can't get by without one. So, if you have to have a monthly plan, why spend any more than you need to? That's why I recommend Mint Mobile. All their plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your current phone number, and keep all of your current contacts. Nothing has to change except the amount you pay. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, and no BS. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/EED. That's mintmobile.com/EED. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabits on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Before diving into the history of why the Swiss maintain a policy of strict neutrality, it's important to understand what neutral means for countries. In the realm of foreign policy, neutrality has a very specific meaning. For the purposes of this episode, we'll use the guidelines laid out by the Swiss in the Hague Convention of 1907. Neutrality means a country will refrain from engaging in any war other than for its own defense, will be equal in treatment towards all belligerent parties during times of war by supplying the same amount of exports to all sides, will not supply mercenary troops for any conflict, and finally, it will not allow any other states to use its territory during time of war. This neutrality policy applies only to external international conflicts. It does not include United Nations operations or decisions made by the community of nations to ensure peace. With this definition of neutrality, we can now address why this policy was adopted in the first place. Switzerland was not always neutral. Neutrality was not officially adopted until 1815. However, there are many instances of the country holding similar policies prior to the official proclamation. The first example of Swiss neutrality dates back to 1515. Prior to 1515, the Swiss Confederacy was expansionist, and the country was renowned for its exceptional mercenaries, a subject that I covered in a previous episode. 1515 saw the old Swiss Confederacy defeated by the French at the Battle of Marignano. This defeat changed Swiss foreign policy for centuries and caused the Swiss to abandon their policy of foreign expansion. This idea was reaffirmed in 1648. In 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia granted Switzerland independence from the Holy Roman Empire. Though the country had limited autonomy for over a century, this officially granted Switzerland the ability to control its own borders. One of the first actions they took with this was to prevent any country's army from passing through Swiss territory, an idea that is carried over to the present day. Swiss neutrality became a firm policy following the Napoleonic Wars. Switzerland was invaded by Napoleon in 1798 to hold control over the Alpine passes. The invasion revealed Switzerland's weak government and resulted in the Swiss becoming a French puppet state known as the Helvetic Republic. The period of the Helvetic Republic was rather short-lived. Napoleon signed the Act of Mediation in 1803, which essentially stated that France would protect Swiss neutrality and independence. Despite the promise, France didn't do this, forcing Switzerland into a defensive treaty with France through the end of the Napoleonic Wars. 1815 marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars and the beginning of a rebuilding period for the rest of Europe, including Switzerland. During the rebuilding process, Switzerland enshrined the policy of neutrality in its constitution and ensured that it was enshrined in the Treaty of Paris, which was signed at the end of the war. The policy of neutrality for Switzerland was popular amongst the other European powers as well. This is because they felt that Switzerland could serve as a valuable buffer zone between France and Austria, helping protect peace across the continent. However, it's overtly simplistic to think that European powers forced Switzerland to be neutral. Neutrality was an active choice the Swiss made for themselves following centuries of practice. The most infamous moments of Swiss neutrality occurred during the two world wars. While the countries around Switzerland were suffering in trenches, fighting in bloody massacres, and butchering millions, Switzerland remained uninvolved. This is especially impressive given Switzerland's location on the continent. During the First World War, Switzerland focused on defense. This strategy was especially important given their position, as they served as the buffer zone between the Allied and Central powers. The Swiss mobilized 250,000 troops to stand guard at the border in preparation for a potential invasion. And the fear was not unfounded, as other neutral countries were invaded during the war, such as Belgium and Luxembourg. Fortunately for the Swiss, their geography provides many natural advantages to help them maintain their security. To start, it's very difficult to enter Switzerland given its mountainous borders, making border crossings possible at only a few spots. Mountains cover 70% of the country, with the Alps protecting the southeastern border and the Jura Mountains protecting the northwestern border. In many parts of the country that aren't protected by mountains, waterways also serve as natural barriers. Switzerland may be neutral, but it's not pacifist. It is a highly organized militia to pursue a strategy of deterrence, or in other words, attacking us would be a miserable experience, so go somewhere else. This strategy worked, as Imperial Germany considered invading France through Switzerland, but later changed their focus to Belgium, following the Schlieffen Plan. The strategy of deterrence combined with their neutral stance kept Switzerland out of the First World War, while their neighbors tore each other apart. After World War I ended, the interwar period began. This era was defined by the formation of the League of Nations, which aimed to foster peace and cooperation to prevent future wars. Switzerland was recognized by the League of Nations as neutral. All countries respected this claim, even if everyone didn't like it. Because of their neutrality, Switzerland hosted the League's meetings and was exempt from any military duties. Despite not having any military obligations, the country's policy of absolute neutrality was changed by the League of Nations. As part of the League, the Swiss were forced to abandon absolute neutrality and adopted a position of differential neutrality. The distinction between absolute neutrality and differential neutrality is subtle. Absolute neutrality requires neutrality in intent and effect, whereas differential neutrality requires neutrality in intent, even if its effects differ. This change was required because Switzerland had to join the League's economic sanctions that were done in the name of peace, which would have violated absolute neutrality. The Swiss followed this policy until 1938, when they had to revert back to absolute neutrality when continuing economic sanctions would threaten its security, especially as tensions were rising in Europe. Which brings us into World War II. During the Second World War, Switzerland was in a precarious position. The country was completely surrounded by the Axis powers following the fall of France, and it was a direct neighbor to the aggressively expansionist Nazi Germany. It later turned out that a German invasion was an actual concern. Hitler had created a plan called Operation Tannenbaum, a proposed invasion of Switzerland that was never implemented. I covered Operation Tannenbaum in a previous episode. When the Second World War began, Switzerland moved immediately to full mobilization and reorganized its military under General Henri Guisan. Recognizing that their plains and modern cities were indefensible against a modern mechanized invasion, Swiss planners concentrated on deterrence. The country maintained a large, well-trained citizen militia, kept aircraft ready for rapid interception, and established a posture of armed neutrality that made clear that they would resist any violation of their borders. They also implemented a scorched earth policy for critical infrastructure, wiring bridges, tunnels, and rail lines for demolition so that any invading force would be denied quick transit across the country. At the core of Switzerland's strategy was the National Redoubt, a vast hardened defense zone in the Central Alps. The redoubt consisted of fortified mountain passes, hidden artillery emplacements, underground barracks, and stockpiled provisions that could sustain tens of thousands of troops for months. In the event of an invasion, the Swiss army would retreat into this Alpine fortress, from which it could control essential north-south transit routes that Germany and Italy relied on for logistics. By turning the heart of the country into a nearly impregnable stronghold, the Swiss intended to impose prohibitive costs on any invader while preserving a core of national resistance. This defensive posture was reinforced by economic and diplomatic maneuvering that aimed to avoid provoking Germany while signaling an unshakable willingness to fight. Swiss air defenses fired on both German and Allied aircraft that violated its airspace, and the army conducted continuous training and fortification work throughout the war. Though surrounded by Axis territory for much of the conflict, Switzerland's credible military preparedness and the difficulty of its terrain and the high opportunity cost of occupying it convinced German planners that invading the country would be an unnecessary and expensive distraction. Controversially, during the war, Switzerland continued to trade with the Nazis as its policy of neutrality required it to trade with countries equally, regardless of their position in the war. This meant that Switzerland was exporting many resources that the Nazis used in the war effort, such as machinery, tools, and chemicals. One of Switzerland's most serious issues was its acceptance of Nazi gold, some of which had been looted from occupied nations and even from victims of the Holocaust. Swiss banks bought this gold in exchange for hard currency and materials, allowing Germany to finance its war effort despite international sanctions. Although the Swiss argued that they had no way to verify the gold's origins during the war, post-war investigations showed that the suspicious circumstances surrounding the gold were widely understood. Switzerland also became a conduit for other assets that the Nazis confiscated, including securities, artworks, and personal valuables that individuals attempted to hide in Swiss vaults. Strict banking secrecy laws made it easy for stolen or coerced deposits to disappear into anonymous accounts, complicating restitution after 1945. This secrecy, while legal under Swiss law, shielded looted property and obstructed heirs' attempts to recover what had been taken from them. Following the end of the World Wars, Switzerland continued its policy of neutrality and became a symbol of neutrality in international affairs. The country hosts numerous international organizations which have granted Switzerland the title of Humanitarian Capital of the World. Switzerland's continued neutrality has been attributed to several factors, the first of which is armed deterrence. The strategy of deterrence only works if Switzerland maintains its military. Switzerland has a large army even during times of peace. Every male between the ages of 18 and 34 is required to undergo military training and serve in the reserves. During service and reserve duty, soldiers keep their issued equipment, including rifles, at home so they can report immediately if called up. Additionally, as previously mentioned, Switzerland uses its geography to its advantage. The country is prepared to self-sabotage itself at a moment's notice. During the Cold War, Switzerland prepared all access points into the country to be destroyed at the press of a button. This allows for Switzerland to seal its borders and prepare should an invasion come. As part of their defense, Switzerland has also built numerous camouflage bunkers, traps, and fortifications to help protect its population after destroying the entry points. They are so prepared that the bunkers currently in Switzerland can protect and house the entire population, plus an extra 10%. Currently, most of these have been turned into public spaces, but they could be converted should the situation arise. Swiss culture also encourages skills that align with the military. Sports like shooting are popular and encouraged. Because of this, there is a widespread understanding and proficiency in firearms. Another part of their neutrality strategy is economics. As previously mentioned, Switzerland maintains trade with countries regardless of their politics, and it trades at the same volume on both sides. It also has secure banking systems and doesn't have extradition treaties with most countries for financial crimes. By maintaining its position as an international center of trade and finance, the rest of the world has an incentive to preserve Swiss neutrality. Switzerland's neutrality has been an active choice. By maintaining a high level of defense and having some exceptional geography, Switzerland has been able to keep itself out of wars for over 200 years. The executive producer of Everything Everywhere Daily is Charles Daniel. The associate producers are Austin Oetken and Cameron Kieffer. Research and writing for this episode was provided by Olivia Ash. My big thanks go to everyone who supports the show over on Patreon. Your support helps make this podcast possible. And I also want to remind everyone about the community groups on Facebook and Discord. This is where everything happens that's outside of the show. As always, if you leave a review on any major podcast app or in the above community groups, you too can have it read on the show.